HS2 and other controversial green, small g, infrastructure projects?
What we've seen is a lot of projects, people have adopted the label green, but just putting the word in there doesn't make it so. And when you look at HS2, when you look at the busway proposed here for Cotton Orchard, what we need is the right transport in the right place at the right price. And both HS2 and this busway utterly fail to meet both of those criteria. It has to be where people want to go to and from. It has to be at an affordable price. And we have to think about what's the cost and what's the possible alternatives. Just saying we want to do this without actually doing a count to look at see what the alternatives are, that very definitely is not green.
Will C2C and CSET help move South Cambs closer to carbon net zero?
No, I don't think either of them will. What would help move them, Cambridge, closer to carbon net zero would be running those bus services on the existing roads. So here in Camborne for Coton, down the Madingley Road, for CSETs along the A1307 and the A1301 corridor. We already have the roads that these buses can go on. We don't need new roads for the buses, we just need more buses with good marketing so that they're well populated, and that in itself will reduce the traffic, means the buses won't get stuck in congestion, and we'll be there much sooner and much cheaper.
And just to add to that, we are in a climate crisis, very much so, but we're also in a nature emergency. And Britain is one of the most nature depleted corners of this battered planet. We just cannot afford to lose more. And we're talking also too about our heritage. This is a 100-year-old orchard. Most of the orchards like this that did exist, that were part of our food system, that were part of our culture, have been grubbed out over the last couple of decades. We need to preserve this for the biodiversity. We need to preserve it for the heritage.
Where do you stand on BNG credits?
I'm afraid I think BNG credits are just an accounting trick, essentially, a way of doing tick box environmentalism while continuing to destroy our environment. It's never going to happen. If there's another area that could do with some biodiversity gain, that's brilliant, and let's do that. It's a bit like carbon offsetting, you know, plant some trees somewhere in Africa to excuse the fact that you're going on a long-haul flight. No, you know, plant the trees in Africa anyway and don't go on the long-haul flight. The same with this biodiversity net gain. I'm afraid, yeah, we need to keep the existing biodiversity where it is.
What are your thoughts on these spreadsheet credit schemes to mitigate loss?
Well, we're back in the situation of what we need is the right house, right place, right price. And how do we build these? Do we have sustainable urban drainage systems? Do we actually care for the environment as much as we can? But somewhere like Cambridge, the problem is everything is absolutely stretched to absolute breaking point. And you know, the idea that we've got some water over here and we account for it over there. We all know that water doesn't actually work like that. Water goes wherever water wants to go. We've had, of course, just a very, very wet winter. With the climate emergency, we're going to have a huge amount of extremes of climate, extremes of weather. And we have to really think about how we construct a society that is resilient and can survive, communities that can survive in that. And I'm afraid, you know, both climate, nature and natural systems, they don't look at the spreadsheet and say, oh, that's all right then. Well, I'm afraid we've had this fiction running around for years of the idea of tactical voting. And the practical reality is, in the vast majority of seats, it will not make absolutely any difference to the final result. What we need is real change in our society. That's really clear, really obvious. And doing the same thing again and again and expecting a different result just isn't going to happen. People don't realise that every Green vote counts, whether or not you actually elect a Green MP, and who knows what might happen if people just decide to vote with what they believe in, what they see they need for our future change. But every Green vote means that we get more what's known as short money, and that'll support the next generation of Green MPs in Parliament and give them the staff and the support they need to be maximally effective. And also organisations like the BBC and others look at the total vote share in terms of media coverage. So the Greens, we've been growing enormously our number of councillors. We're well over 800 councillors now around the country. That's on a graph that looks growing like that. But people, national media don't really look at council elections. They do look at the total vote share in the general election. So every Green vote is a vote for real change, is a vote for a different kind of politics, and is going to have immediately measurable impact.
So for Miranda, on a similar vein, Marcus Gearing, former councillor for Newnham, self-proclaimed environmentalist and climate advocate, says, if you vote Green, you're effectively voting Tory in South Cambs and all their disastrous policies. He does add that C2C Busway on the current route is beyond daft and must be stopped. He didn't acknowledge that in Cambridgeshire, it is the Lib Dem that have control at county and voted en bloc with Labour for this route. Why should South Cambs vote Green?
South Cambs should vote Green to send a message to their Lib Dem controlled county and district councils that they are not impressed with the Lib Dems' supposed environmentalism. Their failure to reject these damaging solutions, the C2C busway and the C-sets and even East-West Rail, is not, it's not going to wash. It's not going to help us reach net zero. It's going to be a very long time before it's any improved public transport, when we could be doing it right now. They could commission a bus next month if they wanted to run buses every 5 minutes instead of every 30 minutes down here. And as for voting Green, if you vote Green, as Natalie said, that means more money actually towards the Green Party in Parliament to support our Green MPs. If you vote Lib Dem, they're going to be in opposition anyway, whether in South Cambridgeshire, whether you vote for the Tory, the Lib Dem, the Green Party, they're all going to be in opposition. They're all going to get short money. So, which party do voters want to support with their short money allocation?
We urge everyone to read your book for themselves, but could you sum up what it means to be Green today in a sentence?
Well, what I would say is we know that we do need to change everything, and what we need, very often when people talk about greenness, they talk about solar panels, insulation, all those kinds of things. Of course we need a new food system. But what we really need is social innovation. We need a society that works for people, which it doesn't at the moment. The terrible levels of mental and physical ill health, the terrible levels of poverty, so many people just struggling to get by. What we've got now isn't working. The things that we need to do for people are also the things we need to do for the planet. That means an education system for life, not just for exams. It means things like a universal basic income, a 4-day working week as standard with no loss of pay. It means thinking about a different kind of criminal justice system. The chapter on that is titled Repairing the Broken. So we really need different ways of doing everything. And Green political philosophy has a complete picture of how we build that. And at the foundation of that is democracy. We need a genuine democracy, which the UK, I'm afraid, is not at the moment.
As a Green, with a capital G, candidate, what do you have to say to people thinking about voting Green for Pippa Hayling?
Well, yes, I've read the same leaflets that Pippa Hayling's sent out to all us South Cambridgeshire residents. I've been a resident in South Cambridgeshire myself for 13 years. Seen my son through state school in South Cambridgeshire. What she actually says in her leaflet is that she would be the greenest MP the constituency has ever had, and my instant reaction is, well, that's a pretty low bar, and she's not the greenest MP they could have. If they want Green, vote Green, and if you want real change, real hope, then that's where you need to vote Green.
And if you look at the analysis that the Friends of the Earth has just done, unsurprisingly really, but it's always good to have it there in figures, it shows that Green policies are far out in the lead in terms of environmental impact compared to the other major parties.
Yeah.
Am I doing the bonus questions?
Bonus questions? Did we do so well?
Yeah,
we get bonus questions.
We actually did do really, really well.
It's one of the great separating lines between us and the other parties. I'm afraid it's very disappointing that Labour, one of their chief criticisms of the government is that the Tories are a low growth party. Well, we cannot have infinite growth on a finite planet. That's not politics, it's physics. And if you look at the Stockholm Institute, it calculates that we have, of the 9 identified planetary boundaries, exceeded 6 of them. Climate and nature are just 2 of those. We cannot keep growing. We have to think that there's a certain size of pie if we think of the economy as a pie. What we have to do is slice that pie up more fairly than we do now, rather than rely, as both Tory and Labour, I'm afraid, do, on the theory the pie grows, so even people who are just getting crumbs will get a few more crumbs. That will not work anymore. The reality is, in the UK and on a global scale, there's enough resources on this planet for everyone to have a decent life, for us to look after climate and nature, if we share those resources out fairly. And really, to borrow a phrase, there is no alternative.
There is no alternative, yeah.
Can you give one example where Greens make a positive impact in government?
Well, what we do is we actually say the things that others are not going to say. And to be really practical about this, for example, in the Environment Bill, now Act, it was actually the first ever time we've won a Green-led vote in Parliament, is we actually briefly got soils inserted as a priority area along with air and water into the Environment Bill, now Act. I got backing from all sides of the House. People were really glad that we'd done that. Now, the Commons knocked it out again, but the government made some promises to do things about soils. But we're the people who will say things that others will not say. Another example from a non-environmental area, we were doing the Economic Crime Bill at the same time as the Financial Services and Markets Bill. And I pointed out to some audible gasps from the other side of the chamber that actually corruption is a huge part of our financial sector. The head of UK Finance says we are the global centre of fraud. And it's clearly out of control. We all know how much so many people are being robbed by scams on the internet, on their phones, etc. And I said, well, the government is saying, and Labour's saying, and the Lib Dems are saying, we want to grow the financial sector. Well, I'm afraid that means we're growing corruption, we're growing fraud, because that's so much a part of it. I got some audible gasps at that. So if you want people who will point out what are really common sense, obvious facts when others won't, what you want to do is vote Green and get Greens elected. So here in Coton Orchard, I know that there's lots of school groups, other young people's community groups come here and learn about nature, get exposed to nature. That's really good for people's health, but it's also crucial that people learn so much more about where food comes from, how nature works. There was a study done a few years ago that found that primary school pupils, those surveyed, 26% of them thought that cheese grew on plants. We've got a real problem with educating people about food, educating people about nature, but also giving young people a chance to be out in nature, be exposed to nature. That's good for their health and well-being, but also crucial for them to understand that this is a fragile, much abused planet. And our economy, it's a complete subset of the environment. We're all dependent on the natural world. And educating young people about that surely has to be absolutely crucial. Once or twice, yes.
If we're allowed to stop talking, then we can.